So can you talk about some specific takeaways that attendees can anticipate?
Well, I think we can both do that. So since each of us are working in different vectors, it probably would be worthwhile to have each of us speak to that. So let me jump in and talk about the customer-facing piece of this. Even the vectors themselves are unique. The traditional business model for a mailing and fulfillment company, or for a communications management firm of some kind, or most graphic communications companies, is a fairly simple business model and a fairly simple business structure. And on the customer side, largely, there's fundamentally one element there, sometimes one and a little more. And the one element that's often there, or almost always there, is some kind of a sales enterprise, some kind of a sales organization, regardless of how large. And nearly everything customer-facing tends to get delegated all the way into the hands of the individual salesperson. So if you look at that as one element of the typical business model, what we're proposing is very different. The three pieces of the customer-facing vector, the three, if you want to call them what we're using as sub-vectors, or the three spokes in that area of the wheel, are brand, business development, and a customer experience. And frankly, it takes all three of those working in concert to create a self-reinforcing kind of a virtuous cycle. So what we're doing is we're talking, in some cases, for the very first time, to business owners who have given little or no attention to intentionally creating a brand and intentionally managing a brand. And given the audience that they're speaking to and how brand sensitive our particular culture is now, it's absolutely non-optional. We're also looking at, instead of looking at purely at selling, we're looking at the whole process of business development, and we're breaking down that artificial gulf between marketing and selling. So we're looking at the creation of an integrated business development process that picks up from the brand, with the brand essentially plowing the road in front of a sales organization, and talks about how do you integrate that into a sustainable, repeatable, and continuing process. And then the final piece of it, or the final spoke in that particular vector that I've been working on, is the issue of customer experience. How are you delivering on the promises that you're making? What are you doing in order to create long-term, very sustainable relationships with customers that go much deeper than what you probably have had heretofore? And using that so that those customers become raving fans and ultimately then reinforce your brand, because your brand lives in the minds of your customers. So it becomes a self-sustaining cycle. So those three things are not aspects of designing or managing a business that tend to be top of mind, or the first things that the most mailing and fulfillment, or even most marketing service providers are actively talking about at the moment. Talking to them about brand is often a new conversation. Talking about an integrated business development process is a new conversation. Talking about intentionally creating and managing a customer experience is a new conversation.
And in the areas where Chris is going to be focusing on of technology and workflow and management of those things, they tie in with the things that I'm discussing, and also that Wayne has just mentioned, because I'm looking at finance. You can't talk about a business without talking about the way all of your resources are gathered together, and the money flows that go through that business. Because in order to create a change in a business, you have to find a way to unwind the previous things that you've done and not cut them off in cold turkey. But you need a plan in order to do those kinds of things, because we believe that we have a vastly different philosophy about capital investment that we will be proposing, and also in the way that we look at the skills of the people we bring into our organization, and the reliance on alliances that all businesses of all sizes are going to have as a way of adapting to changes in the marketplace. So all of these are not the traditional things that you're typically going to hear in conferences specifically targeted toward the one thing. If you go to a human resources conference, you're going to hear about one particular thing about human resources, but you won't have a sense of how it touches all the other areas. And that integration is what's really important